So, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, so today, okay. So today our plan is to just do a quick warm-up activity for the first 15 minutes. So there will be a prompt and I just want you guys to write whatever you can in those 15 minutes. And then after that, I'm going to give you guys 5 vocabulary words that you might have not known before. If you have, then that's good for you. And then thirdly, we're going to go over the steps for writing an essay as who here knows they're going to go into the IB program? Right? Okay. Okay. So I think that's quite a lot of you guys. So let me just let people in. So we're just going to write the steps to writing an essay. And if I continue teaching, then I will go into like specific like PRTs, CARTs, and those central essays that are part of the IB program. And then lastly, if we have time, then we're going to go through a reading comprehension passage, as I think that's one of the aspects of the IB program that a lot of people struggle with. It's not necessarily the writing part, basically. Okay, so your prompt today is fairly simple. It's just, are there dangers of teenagers spending too much time on social media? But while you're writing this, try to make the most of your 15 minutes. So with these 15 minutes, what are you going to plan on doing? Since you guys have 15 minutes, I feel like that's enough time for you guys to create a quick outline before diving straight into your essay. And then you want to pay attention to your grammar, your spelling, your syntax. Does anybody know what syntax is? Okay, so I'm guessing that nobody knows. So syntax just basically means like your sentence structure. So complex sentences, simple sentences, compound sentences. And then also pay attention to your diction. Do you guys know what diction is? Right, it's vocabulary. James, I think I remember you from when I taught in last year. And then, so yeah, so diction is just your choice of vocabulary. So based on what you're writing, you want to choose specific words that will actually make your writing more fluent, I guess. So just make sure you're using a complex vocabulary level. And then lastly, try to have imagery. Even though this is actually an argumentative essay, so you actually don't need imagery, but if you want, feel free to do so. So I will give you guys 15 minutes starting from now. And if you have any questions about anything, just feel free to give me a private message. So there's not a Google Classroom for this, but just do what I did last time. So just paste your paragraphs within the Zoom chat. So you can basically write it on a Google Doc and then copy and paste it into the chat. I think there's 2 BYJs because one is a moderator. All right. So since there's not really any more essays coming in, I'm just going to assume that you guys are all finished. So I'm going to move on. If are there people who still haven't finished their little writing piece? Okay, I'm going to take that silence as a no. So I'm going to move on to our next part of today, which is vocabulary. So we have 5 new vocabulary words. Does anybody recognize any of these words above? All right, so I'm going to take that silence like as a no again. So our first, okay, the first one, nice. All right, so the first one is negligible, and this essentially means not important. So it's, in other words, it's a synonym for like trivial or insignificant. So would you guys like to make a sample sentence with this? And it's an adjective, or just like a little phrase with the word inside it utilized. All right, okay. So nice sample sentences. Now, the next one is nonchalant, and this just means really calm and coolly unconcerned. And this is used as a noun. So a synonym for this would just be um, just unconcerned or calm. And then the next word is obfuscate. And this, what this means is to just like confuse something. And the synonym again, you can just use confuse. And this is a verb. So this might be a bit confusing. So could you guys write like a sample phrase with this word, just so I know that you guys understand it? Okay. All right. So I don't see any problems with how it's used so far. So our next word is obsolete, and this means no longer in use, and it's an adjective. And you could, another phrase for it would be out of date. I'm sure you guys hear that a lot. Um, so that one's pretty simple. And then the next one that we have is obstinate, and this just means like adhering to one's opinion or course. So that's just like a very stubborn person who isn't willing to change their courses of action. And that's an adjective once again. So adjectives are fairly simple because they just describe something, right? I'm sure you guys all know that. So are there any questions with these vocabulary words? Okay, so if there's no questions, then I'm going to move on to the next slide. So today we're just going to be talking about the basic outline of writing an essay. I feel like we don't have enough time to go into what makes an effective essay in IB, but I guess we will just go over the outlines, the very basic outline. Okay. All right. So here are the very basic parts of writing an essay. So firstly, you must analyze the question carefully to make sure you answer what is asked. So in an IB prompt, they frequently ask you like to what extent, or what is the cause of this, right? So you have to really read the question to know what you're going to write, because if you write an amazing essay but it doesn't follow the guidelines of the question, then you're not going to get a great mark on that. So secondly, you must use formal academic English, not slang or text language. I feel like this is a very basic phrase, but that's just a little reminder for you guys. And then thirdly, you cannot just write your opinion. Now, this is something that's really important when you're writing in high school. So you need to have evidence to back up everything that you write. If it's just your opinions, then you really don't have any backup or support for what you're trying to portray. So just make sure you have like citing your citing sources and those type of sites. And then different teachers may have different rules about what academic language they want. So make sure you check with them. I feel like this is a very important portion of essay writing, because even though you might get such an amazing essay award or something in Canada, if your teacher doesn't like your writing, you're not going to get a good mark. And then you must reference where you got your information from. So when you're backing up your evidence, you can't just say according to the United Nations 3.4% or something like that. You can't just write that. You have to include citing and where you got that from, or else that is plagiarism. And then lastly, you need to write in paragraphs, right? So this is very simple again. So start with an introduction and then finish with a conclusion. All right, so one of the characteristics of an IB student is that they are a critical thinker. So we're just going to touch on that for a little. So people often have trouble understanding what IB means by critical thinking. So it is worthwhile spending some time exploring the ideas around critical thinking and the difference between description and analysis or critical thinking, right? Description is you're listing everything in the passage. For example, you read a poem about climate change, for example. You're just listing what the passage was talking about. But analysis or critical thinking is really knowing what the author is trying to portray. Like, why is the author writing this essay? And as well as like having sort of insight on what they really mean, because sometimes there are metaphorical languages in their passages. And critical thinking shows that you possess a higher level of thinking beyond others. So it shows that you're not just, so it shows that you not just like know what the passage is saying, but you know what like they're trying to say. And then critical thinking also shows that you are willing to go above and beyond in IB. So instead of just listing what the author is saying, you're talking about why the author perhaps wrote this, or to what extent this is like an effective essay. You could analyze their writing. And then lastly, jobs require people to be able to think critically, which is why in high school we all learn critical thinking. So, for example, let's look at this picture here, right? So the difference between critical thinking and just description can really be seen through here. So description would just be like a plastic bottle with a blue cap, right? With water in it, right? That's just description. You're just seeing what you're just stating what you see. But critical thinking is going above and beyond and really analyzing like a meaning behind it. Now, when you look at a water bottle, there may not be meaning behind it, but if you think really hard, you can actually find some correlations between this and some things in life that you can analyze with it. So you guys first give a try on what you think it means. There's never a right answer in English. So you can really use your creativity to imagine what this water bottle means. So feel free to type in the chat what you think it means. Right, I'm seeing pollution, which is a great source of analysis, right? Because when you look at a water bottle, you can connect it with water pollution, right? Plastic is one of the leading causes of it. So that's a great example of analysis. You're not just saying, oh, it's a blue water bottle. That can get you a sufficient, but not an excellent mark. So that's a good source of analysis there. Do you guys understand critical thinking or no? Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to move on then. So the second part, oh, JW, you don't understand it. What do you not understand about critical thinking? It's not really, yeah, well, it could be, it's just called critical thinking, but there's a difference between critical thinking and description, right? Description will get you a very basic mark in school, like in English, well, if you are going in IB at least, in English, they're looking for you to be able to analyze a piece, not just know what it means, right? Like the thoughts behind it, metaphorical language and why they used it, correlations to the modern world, right? So there is a difference between it. It's just called something differently. You can call it normal thinking, but it's usually just called critical thinking because normal thinking is just when you look at this water bottle, you see, oh, it's a blue cap. It's plastic. It has water inside it, right? That's just like normal thinking, but IB looks for critical thinking. Okay, so next we're going to talk about a very important aspect of writing. So before you even start your essay, you need to understand what the essay is asking you. So do you understand the question that is being asked? Do you know what topic you need to address? Did you already summarize each of the articles in your own words? So make sure you understand the key components of the question. Those key components are often bolded, so make sure you really read it closely. And the essay question will usually have some direction words that will give you clues about what the essay wants. For example, explain, describe, critique, argue, discuss. So explain is not the same as critique. So make sure you really look at these important words. If they ask to what extent, they're not asking you to describe the event. They're asking you to state, like, in your own opinion, for example, to what extent was World War II a leading factor for women in the labor force, right? So you need to analyze that by yourself, not just explain, oh, it did help or something like that, because that's just describing it and it's not what the essay question was asking. So make sure you just really read the essay question. And then I'm sure you guys all know this, but the general essay structure is first, you need to have an introduction. So briefly answer the question with your thesis. Secondly, for your first body paragraph, make sure you have a topic sentence and state your points for that one section. And then you might possibly also explore both sides of the question if it is a argumentative essay. And then for your second body question, your second topic sentence and the same as above. Your third body paragraph would be the same as the other body paragraphs, topic sentence, evidence, structure, and then arguing both sides. And then you need to have a conclusion at the end, which is a paragraph that essentially wraps up everything that you were talking about. And if this is a personal essay, you can offer your own personal opinion if you have time. Generally in IB though, the time is really limited, so you really want to just get to the chase. And then if you have time, you can first write a messy draft. Usually writing a draft will help you get your ideas organized so that when you're in the middle of the essay, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm confused. I thought I was going to write about this, but what if that's not what the question was asking, right? So just if you have time, make sure you just make a messy draft. Even if you don't have time, you can just list out the points that you want to cover, and that would be enough. So don't try to control your first responses to the question too much. Just write what comes to mind while you have the question in your mind. Let me just respond to the question. Okay. So what questions do you have for the authors of the article you are responding to, right? So this is where critical thinking comes in. You could talk about this author was like lacking in the area, providing evidence for this piece, for example. And then what inconsistencies do you find in the articles? What problems do you see? What holes can you identify? This is a part of critical thinking. And what is your main message? So the main message is what you really want to say about the topic you have been asked. So just like have a general idea of this, and what claims can you make that might support your main message? So if you don't have any, you need to check to see if your main message is robust enough. So you need to make sure that the message you're trying to convey has enough evidence to actually back it up. Even though it may not be as descriptive as something that you want, if it has enough evidence for it, then it will be better than something that sounds really great at first, but you cannot write about it because you just get stuck. And then lastly, what evidence and examples do you find that support your claims? If you don't have any, it's time to do more writing and reviewing to change some of your topic sentences. So you really have to focus on the introduction in IB because this is what the teacher reads at first, and this is what gives them the impression of if they will like it or not, right? And sometimes teachers will just read the introduction and then give you a mark. They might not even read the whole essay. So you need to make sure that your introduction is the best part. So make sure you know, so does your introduction provide some context or background for the issue and then relate your thesis or main message? If not, why not? Because that's a very important aspect of a writing. And if you don't have that, you might need to change your thesis. And is your thesis clear? Do you need to explain what you are trying to show? So if from reading the thesis, the teacher doesn't know what you're going to be writing about, then there's a problem with your thesis because your thesis should be like a short summary of everything that you're writing in your essay. And then does your last sentence draw the reader into the rest of your paragraph? So if the teacher likes it, they're going to continue reading. If they don't like your introduction paragraph, they're probably going to stop, right? And also, does your introduction relate to the essay question, right? That's what I just mentioned before, and that's a very important aspect of writing. If your introduction is amazing, right? The teacher loves your writing, but it doesn't relate to the question, that's not going to get you very far. And if you have a specific essay question, your intro must relate directly to the question. If you have a broad essay question, your response must touch on the issues discussed in the question, but usually cannot attend to all the details of the question. So next class, if we do have one, I will be covering thesis statements. And then also just make sure in your introduction, sometimes when people write, they know the question, right? They're like, oh, this is asking about me critiquing this essay. But then once they get further and further in the introduction, they kind of forget about that and start going into just describing what the author was saying. So make sure you just like don't delve away from what you're trying to answer. So make sure you always have the question in mind. And then also the supporting paragraphs are another important portion, not as important as the introduction, but still fairly important. So do you develop your main idea in your subsequent paragraphs using assertions and supporting evidence to make your point? If not, start finding evidence and examples to support your points. And do you include lots of shoulds in your writing? If so, this type of writing can point to assertions without evidence and examples to back up claims. If you have a lot of shoulds, then that shows that you haven't really done much research on your topic, I guess, and it won't be very effective, right? It's just like, oh, they should do this. The author should have written part of this. And next, try to rewrite most of the shoulds out of the response. So if you don't know what to do with the shoulds, you could just replace it with coulds to see what happens, because shoulds is usually a very upfront way of like pushing your point, I guess, a bit too far, because you're essentially trying to state that your opinion is like superior to others. And then lastly, usually you have to offer more evidence and examples to shore up your ideas. So if it's an argumentative essay, you should have statistics or data to back up your evidence. Or if it's a literary analysis, you can have quotations from certain people that are well known. So are there any questions about what I'm talking about so far? All right, so I'm going to take that as a no. So lastly, you want to also focus on your conclusion. You really should be focusing on every single phrase that you're writing. So first, do you even have a conclusion? If not, why do you not have one? Right? I'm sure all of you guys do, but just make sure you have one. And then okay. All right. I need to go back. I scrolled too far. All right. So does your conclusion restate your first paragraph? If so, then you need to delete your conclusion and start again. This is middle school writing, right? I'm sure, how many of you guys are in middle school? All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So in middle school, I'm sure your teachers tell you that you need to just essentially your conclusions and your introductions basically start and wrap it up, right? And it's sort of like rephrasing your introduction. But in high school, you have to, that's not something that you should do. So your conclusion should synthesize the many ideas discussed in the essay in order to offer your reader more insight onto the problem. So even in the conclusion, the reader should be getting more information about what you were discussing previously. And what does your conclusion need in order to further the main idea that you are discussing? This is a really hard portion, but just really try to spend some time thinking about it. And eventually you will have more information to add to it. And did you pull the strings of the analysis together for the reader? And did you show how the chunks of analysis work together? So conclusion should just wrap up everything. It shouldn't be the same as the introduction. You should still be talking about like one of the main messages you were conveying, like the introduction, but also you should be having a bit more analysis to it, even though it is the conclusion. So you could add portions from like a body paragraph into that. That's not something that you can't do. Okay, so now we're just going to do a little reading comp because these are very, 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 very important in IB. So I'll send the link into the chat. So feel free, I don't think we have enough time for the questions today, but just feel free to read it. And while you're reading it, make sure you think about what is the author trying to say? What literary devices are they using, if you know what that is? And the main, I guess, messages and meanings to the piece as well. So I guess for the rest of the class, we can spend some time reading this. And once you guys are done, you guys can go to the questions if you want, but we will not have time to get to it today. So. I couldn't see when you called. He told me